Welcome back to PodX Studio, everyone. We've got a deep dive today tailored for those of you who are maybe new to current affairs or just want a clear and concise breakdown of some recent key events.
Absolutely.
We're going to be looking at a report, pulling out some of the most impactful things happening globally, and we're going to break them down in a way that makes sense, makes them insightful, and helps you understand why these things matter.
Yeah, and especially for those of you out there who are preparing for exams like the UPSC, we'll be highlighting those key takeaways that might just give you an edge.
So no matter where you are in your understanding of global events, think of this deep dive as your shortcut to getting up to speed.
Love it. Shortcut to knowledge. Let's dive in.
Okay, so let's preview what we're dealing with here.
All right, so this report highlights 4 major developments. The eruption of Mount Stuido in Indonesia.
Okay.
Brazil making a move to join OPEC Plus as an observer.
Interesting.
A fresh initiative between India and the U.S.
Okay.
And some potential game-changing regulations for India's higher education system.
Okay, so we've got natural disasters, we've got those global power plays, international collaborations, and education reforms all in one report.
Yeah, a lot to unpack.
Definitely. Where should we begin?
Why don't we start with that immediate, visually striking event, the eruption of Mount Stuido?
Yeah, 2,000-meter ash cloud, that's pretty impressive. What's the significance of an event like this? I mean, beyond, the immediate impact on the surrounding area.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's a stark reminder that Indonesia, because of its location on the Pacific Ring of Fire, right, is incredibly vulnerable to things like volcanic eruptions and earthquakes.
Right.
This particular eruption triggered an orange-level aviation warning.
Okay.
And that's serious business because volcanic ash can really mess up aircraft engines.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not just about, the immediate vicinity of the volcano, right?
Right.
It can have those ripple effects on air travel and even, global supply chains.
Absolutely. It can have far-reaching consequences, and it also underlines how critical continuous monitoring and disaster preparedness is in these regions that are prone to these kinds of events. Early warning systems, evacuation plans,
Right.
They can literally be lifesavers.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that we can't really control nature, but we can certainly prepare for, some of its fury.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on from natural forces to some man-made ones, particularly in the world of oil. Brazil joining OPEC Plus as an observer. What's the story here?
Yeah, so this is a very fascinating development and definitely something to keep a close eye on.
Okay.
So OPEC Plus, as you may know, it's this group of oil-producing nations who basically collaborate to control those oil production levels and influence those global oil prices. Now, Brazil, with its vast offshore oil reserves, especially those pre-salt fields, they're a major player in the energy market.
So even as an observer, they're bringing a lot of weight to the table.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Okay.
And their decision to align themselves more closely with OPEC Pluses, which includes countries like Saudi Arabia, Russia,
Right.
it could signal a shift in their foreign policy priorities. And it raises some interesting questions about the future of global oil prices.
Interesting. So potential implications for the global economy and potential geopolitical shifts as well.
Absolutely. It's a move that could have those ripple effects across multiple sectors and regions.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of those strategic alliances, let's talk about this India-US Compacts initiative. What are the key takeaways from this, and why is it being touted as kind of a game changer?
Well, the full details are still emerging, but it seems to be this broad framework designed to strengthen that strategic partnership between India and the U.S. across multiple fronts. Think things like critical technologies, semiconductors, AI, that sort of thing.
Right.
Defense collaborations, deeper economic ties, more trade agreements, maybe some investments.
So that's a pretty wide scope.
Yeah, it is.
What's driving this push for closer collaboration between these two nations?
Well, for India, this partnership is seen as a way to bolster its position in the Indo-Pacific region,
Right.
which is becoming increasingly important geopolitically.
Yeah, definitely.
It also offers them access to cutting-edge technologies and those potential economic benefits, through increased trade and investment.
So it's about strategic positioning and economic growth.
Exactly. And for the U.S., it aligns with their strategic pivot towards Asia, which has been like a key foreign policy focus in recent years, right?
Yeah.
They see India as a crucial partner in maintaining stability and promoting their interests in the region, particularly as a counterbalance to China's growing influence.
So a strategic partnership that's beneficial to both sides in different ways.
Exactly. But its success will depend on how well they manage their potentially different priorities and navigate the complexities of that global landscape.
That makes sense. Now let's shift gears and talk about something a bit closer to home for many of our listeners. The draft UGC Regulations 2025. How significant are these proposed changes, and who will they impact the most?
These regulations are aiming to bring about significant reforms in India's higher education system.
Okay.
So there are potential impacts for students, faculty, and institutions all across the country.
So a pretty big deal then. What are some of the key areas these regulations are likely to address?
Well, they're looking at a whole range of things: curriculum design, faculty qualifications, accreditation processes, funding models for institutions, the growing role of digital learning,
Right.
and even the level of autonomy given to universities.
So potentially a pretty comprehensive overhaul of the system.
Yeah, it's pretty ambitious.
What are some of the broader debates or discussions you think these changes might spark?
Well, one of the key debates will likely revolve around the balance between that UGC oversight, right, and autonomy for universities, particularly for those top institutions. There's a push to give those leading universities more freedom to manage their own affairs, but at the same time, there's a need to ensure quality and equity across the board.
It's about finding that right balance, freedom with accountability.
Exactly. And then there's that whole question of funding, right?
Right.
How do we ensure that higher education is adequately funded, especially for institutions that might be struggling? And how do we make sure that education is accessible and affordable for everyone, regardless of their background?
Those are some really big questions.
Yeah, they are.
And I imagine the answers will have a significant impact on the future of education in India.
Absolutely. It'll be really fascinating to see how these regulations evolve and what impact they ultimately have on that landscape of higher education in the country.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. From volcanic eruptions to global oil alliances, international partnerships, and potential education reforms. It's clear that the world is a dynamic and interconnected place.
It certainly is.
And understanding these events and their potential ripple effects is crucial for anyone who wants to stay informed and engaged in the world around them.
Absolutely. You got to connect the dots. Welcome back to part 2 of our deep dive.
I'm excited to kind of delve deeper into these events and unpack their potential long-term consequences.
Absolutely. Let's start by revisiting Mount Dakota's eruption.
Okay.
While visually dramatic, it also offers valuable insights into broader geographical trends.
Right. It's not just about this one eruption. It's about understanding Indonesia's vulnerability to natural disasters in general.
Precisely. Indonesia's location on the Pacific Ring of Fire makes it a hotspot for earthquakes and volcanic activity. And, this specific eruption, it highlights the critical need for robust disaster preparedness strategies, not just for Indonesia, but for other countries in similar seismic zones as well.
So a local event with global implications. It makes you wonder, about the potential impact of climate change on the frequency and intensity of events like this.
That's a really crucial question. And while this particular eruption might not be directly linked to climate change, the scientific consensus is pretty clear. Rising global temperatures can exacerbate extreme weather events, including those related to volcanic activity.
It's a sobering thought. It kind of underscores the need for, proactive measures to mitigate the impacts of climate change and really invest in that disaster preparedness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now let's shift our focus to another event with potentially far-reaching consequences. Brazil joining OPEC Plus as an observer.
Right.
We touched on this a bit earlier.
We did.
This move has sparked a lot of discussion, and for good reason. It signals a potential realignment of global energy alliances, with Brazil seemingly siding closer to those OPEC Plus heavyweights like Saudi Arabia and Russia.
Yeah.
Which could create some tension with the U.S., right?
Potentially, yeah. The U.S. has historically been a key ally of Brazil, but this move suggests that Brazil might be looking to diversify its partnerships and assert its independence on the global stage.
It's a delicate balancing act. Brazil needs to weigh its economic interests against its geopolitical alliances, especially in a world where energy security is becoming increasingly important.
Exactly. And this move also raises some intriguing questions about the future of renewable energy investments in Brazil.
How so?
Well, will they continue to prioritize those investments, or will they shift their focus towards maximizing their oil production in alignment with OPEC Plus's objectives?
That's a crucial question, especially given that global push towards sustainable energy sources. It'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. Now let's turn our attention to the India-US Compact Initiative.
Okay.
A partnership with, potentially, significant implications for both countries.
Yeah, for sure.
This initiative, while still in its early stages, reflects a growing convergence of interests between India and the U.S. Both countries see each other as crucial partners in navigating the complexities of the Indo-Pacific region, particularly in light of China's growing assertiveness.
Right. It's about finding strength in numbers in a region where that geopolitical competition is heating up.
Exactly. But this partnership isn't just about security, right?
No.
It also has a strong economic component.
Absolutely. The initiative is expected to boost collaboration in critical sectors like technology, defense, and trade, opening up new avenues for economic growth and innovation for both countries.
So a win-win situation.
Potentially, yeah. But like any partnership, it comes with its own set of challenges.
Like what?
Well, for instance, India and the U.S. have different priorities and perspectives on certain issues, right?
Right.
And navigating these differences will be crucial for the long-term success of the initiative.
It's about finding that sweet spot where both countries feel like they're getting something valuable out of the deal, while also respecting each other's sovereignty and interests.
Exactly. And let's not forget the potential impact of domestic politics on this partnership.
Right.
Changes in government or shifts in public opinion in either country could really influence the trajectory of this initiative.
It's a dynamic situation with many moving parts. Now let's bring our focus back to India and delve deeper into the potential implications of the draft UGC Regulations 2025.
Okay.
These proposed regulations represent a significant attempt to reshape India's higher education system, and they're bound to generate a lot of discussion and debate.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
One of the key areas of focus is university autonomy, with a push to give top institutions more freedom to manage their own affairs.
Right.
Which makes sense in theory, but how do you ensure quality and accountability across the board if universities have more autonomy?
That's the million-dollar question. The regulations need to strike a balance between granting institutions greater flexibility, right?
Yeah.
And ensuring that they meet certain quality standards. This will likely involve revisiting accreditation processes and developing those robust mechanisms for monitoring and evaluation.
It's about empowering institutions while also holding them accountable for their performance.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of funding, which is always a contentious topic in education.
Always.
The regulations need to address the financial sustainability of higher education institutions, especially in light of rising costs and increasing demand.
Right, because you can't really talk about quality education without talking about adequate resources.
Absolutely. And access is another critical factor. How do we ensure that these reforms don't exacerbate existing inequalities? How do we make quality higher education accessible and affordable for students from all socioeconomic backgrounds?
These are really important questions, and I'm sure they'll be at the forefront of the discussions surrounding these regulations.
Definitely. The success of these reforms will depend on how well they address these complex and interconnected issues.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this second part of our deep dive, and it's clear that these seemingly disparate events are all kind of intricately connected.
They certainly are. And as we move into part 3, we'll explore these connections further and analyze their potential impact on the global landscape.
Sounds fascinating. I can't wait to hear what other insights you have to share. I'm sure our listeners are equally eager to connect the dots. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. I'm really looking forward to connecting the dots between these seemingly disparate events and kind of uncovering that bigger picture.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
So why don't we start by looking at those potential long-term impacts of Mount Dutona's eruption.
Okay.
While the immediate focus is obviously on those affected communities and the disruption to air travel, this event also raises some crucial question about disaster preparedness in a world that's increasingly vulnerable to extreme weather events, right?
Right. It's a stark reminder that natural disasters don't just affect one particular region.
Right.
They can have ripple effects across the globe, impacting supply chains, economies, even geopolitical dynamics.
Exactly. And this eruption also underscores the need for greater international cooperation when it comes to disaster preparedness and response. Sharing knowledge, resources, expertise, those things can make a significant difference in mitigating the impacts of such events.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together when it comes to things like this.
Yeah.
Now let's shift our focus to Brazil's decision to join OPEC Plus as an observer. We've discussed the potential economic and geopolitical implications, but how does this move fit into that broader energy landscape, particularly in the context of that global push for renewable energy?
That's a key question. And Brazil's move seems to signal a prioritization of those short-term economic gains through oil production.
Okay.
Potentially at the expense of long-term sustainability goals.
Right.
It raises concerns about whether this will slow down their investments in renewable energy and maybe even hinder that global transition towards cleaner energy sources.
It's a delicate balancing act between those immediate needs and long-term sustainability, and it'll be really interesting to see how Brazil navigates that path in the coming years.
Yeah.
Now let's put our attention to the India-US Compact Initiative.
Okay.
We've discussed the potential benefits for both countries, but how does this partnership kind of reshape that geopolitical chessboard in the Indo-Pacific region, especially in relation to China?
Yeah, I mean, this initiative is undoubtedly a significant development in the Indo-Pacific. It strengthens the strategic alignment between India and the U.S. It's signaling kind of a united front against China's growing assertiveness in the region. This could lead to, increased military cooperation, joint infrastructure projects, and a more coordinated approach to counter China's economic and political influence.
So it's not just about containing China's military expansion.
Right.
It's about creating a network of alliances and partnerships to counterbalance their influence across multiple domains.
Precisely. And this initiative also has implications for the broader global order. It reinforces the idea of a multipolar world, right? Where power is distributed among multiple nations rather than concentrated in the hands of one or two superpowers.
It's a shift away from those traditional dynamics of power and influence, and it's creating a more complex and interconnected, I think, geopolitical landscape. Now let's bring it back to India and consider the long-term implications of those draft UGC Regulations 2025 for the country's education system and its role in the global economy.
Right. Well, these regulations, if implemented effectively, have the potential to transform India's higher education landscape, make it more competitive, innovative, responsive to the needs of that 21st century workforce. And this could position India as like a major hub for talent, research, and development, which could then attract investment, drive economic growth.
So it's not just about improving the quality of education. It's about creating a knowledge-based economy that can compete on the global stage.
Exactly. But the success of these reforms hinges on addressing some key challenges, right?
Yeah, what are some of those?
Well, ensuring equitable access to quality education, fostering a culture of research and innovation, providing adequate funding and resources to institutions. All of these things are going to be crucial for achieving the desired outcomes.
It's a multifaceted undertaking that requires, I think, a long-term vision, sustained commitment, and effective execution.
For sure.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We explored a range of events and their potential ripple effects across the globe. It's clear that the world is becoming increasingly interconnected, and understanding these complex dynamics is essential for navigating the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead.
It certainly is. And as we've seen, these events, they're not isolated incidents. They're all interconnected. They're shaping and being shaped by global trends, technological advancements, and that evolving balance of power. Staying informed, critically analyzing information, and engaging in meaningful discussions are crucial for making sense of this complex world.
Couldn't agree more. A big thank you to our expert guide for sharing your insights and helping us connect the dots. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. We hope you found this deep dive insightful and thought-provoking. We'll be back with more deep dives into fascinating topics, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. Don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment letting us know what you thought of this episode. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions.